Welcome to Digital Drive. Today I'm excited to interview my friend Aaron Painter. Aaron is the CEO of Nametag, which is the company building the fast, safe, everywhere ID. With a mission to bring authenticity to the internet and enabled people to build more trusted relationships, Aaron and his team of industry experts have seen the need to put privacy first by giving us, the consumer, more control over the sharing of our personal information. And it also gives businesses a platform to better safeguard their customer accounts. Now, having lived and worked in 6 countries and 4 continents, Aaron exemplifies a new generation of global leaders. Back in 2017, he actually released a book called Loyal, where he describes that his key to leadership is fostering a culture of listening. Previously, Aaron was the CEO of London-based CloudReach, where he and I had an opportunity to work very closely together, and he is also the former vice president and general manager for Microsoft in China, Hong Kong, and Brazil. He also served as the chief of staff to the president of Microsoft International in France. Aaron is an extremely impressive guy who has done business all over the world and has incredible stories from his adventures. So I hope you enjoy the show today. Thanks for watching. Aaron, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Rebecca. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Yes, this is so fun. It's been too long, so it's lovely to see your face.
Yeah, thank you. I have enormous respect for you, but I have also enormous respect for what you've been building with Digital Drive. I've been an avid watcher, listener, and it's just been fun and educational every time.
Well, let's start talking a little bit about what you're doing these days. I've known you for a while now. We even had the chance to work together way back when I first moved to the big city. So I want to talk about your new company, Nametag, and what you're doing, specifically how you're driving digital transformation. So tell us a little bit about what you guys are up to.
Yeah, we call Nametag the fast, safe, everywhere ID. The problem we're trying to solve is that our physical and our digital lives have merged, but our identities haven't. If you think about how easy it is today to be able to walk in somewhere physically and show that license or a government ID card that you got, and for people to have sense and trust that it's you and you're able to enter that bar or open that bank account or do a whole bunch of things, that is such an easy human experience. When you try and think about the same experience online, it's nowhere near the same. You're stuck with other people asking you these random questions, your favorite color and the name of your cat and all the street you grew up on, or maybe sending you a text message to networks that unfortunately aren't very secure because they themselves struggle with authenticating people and knowing who their real customers are when they call for account changes, which makes that SMS verification not that great. And then things like two-factor authentication with an authenticator app that works, but it's more about protecting a device and that you are the one who holds that phone than actually knowing that it's really you. So we've tried to build a way for people to have a sense of ownership. We call it the next generation of identity. Nametag is quite simply a digital ID that you can have on your phone. It starts with your government ID. It's validated against a biometric selfie you take, so we know that you are the one who's holding that ID. And then we connect to other data sources, all of which are secured heavily and under your control. So you choose when you share them with companies. Companies can ask for your information, ask for your identity confirmation. You review the request. You see if you really need to be sharing as much as they're asking for. And when you consent and you click approve, that company knows that it's actually you because you've agreed and because we've verified behind the scenes that you are who you say you are.
So it's a step beyond, we're going to send you this text message and trust the message, because that can be totally faked. That's a great point that you make. And you just have to have the device and you can still prove you're that person. I can see all kinds of use cases of how it ties to NFTs and blockchain and Bitcoin and things like that too, and how you'll verify who your digital persona is down the road.
Yeah, it's incredible the number of scenarios where you think, I do this in a digital way. Spirit of digital transformation, right? That we talk about with every company and every industry going through that change. Mm-hmm. Often they need, in order to have a trusted interaction or a trusted transaction, they actually need to know who they're dealing with. And whether that reduces the cost of fraud or identity theft on the other side for consumers, or even can just improve customer experience. It saves time, it saves the expense in those customer service engagements, and it certainly makes it a better experience overall.
That's so cool. No more awkward, what's your mother's maiden name? Confirming that with the person on the other line. I love it. Yeah, you call it multi-factor identity. So ultimately, as that becomes a commonplace term and everybody has one. Is the reality you only have one and you can only be that one person? So to eliminate fraud too.
That's our spirit. And the best way to explain it would probably be like a credit card. When you go and like swipe a credit card today at a store, it's running through the merchant processor. And the questions being asked are not just were you issued the credit card, but the questions being asked are, does this person have sufficient credit at the moment? Has there been any suspicious activity on their account at the moment? All these sorts of things, the factors that are going in before you simply get that decision that shows up on the screen, transaction approved. I view identity as the same thing. Identity shouldn't be a one-time thing. Like you went once to the DMV and therefore your ID is good for 10 years. The future of identity should be real time.
And then on the person who is the owner of the identity, are there controls in place where they can manage who gets what? Like who can know their vaccination status, who can know their credit score? How do you protect that piece of the picture?
Yeah, 100%. Everything is meant to be user controlled. So the user uploads their data, it's validated, and they are in control of when they share it. And so the best way they would interact could be with a QR code and using their QR code to identify themselves, could be with their phone number, or it could even be with what we call a privacy number that lives on the home screen of the app. They can share, they can put on their t-shirt. It means nothing to anyone. All it is the ability to request information from you. We call it don't overshare. So the best like offline analogy would be like when you walk into a bar and they're trying to assess if, let's say in the US, you're over 21 to get a drink. Why do they need to know your home address and your actual birth date and like all these other things about you? All they really need to know is like, is this person who's coming in who they say they are and are they over 21? And so how can you limit the scopes of what's being asked? So in that scenario, let's say in person, a bartender should be able to ask you to validate you're over 21 and nothing more. We got that information from your ID, but they don't need to have the rest of what's on your ID. You can be selective on what you agree to share.
This is so cool.
It's big, it's bold, which is incredibly exciting and also means we have a lot to do. So our team, we're up to about 8 folks now and everyone is working super hard, but having a lot of fun.
Let's talk a little about your adventures because I've always been super intrigued by the stories that you've shared about your time internationally.
Yeah, 5.5 years in China, 2 in Hong Kong, 3.5 in Beijing, which I loved. I was working for Microsoft in both roles. And Hong Kong was more of a mature business, as we might call it, that was in a mature market, technically, that was kind of in need of some new energy and slightly different ways of doing things. And we had an incredibly talented team there, but they were people that often their voice wasn't heard. They didn't often have the ability to kind of shape the way that things were happening. And so I found really quickly by being there that by just listening and engaging with folks, they often knew the way that things could be or the way that the business could be better.
You have some great stories too that you've shared publicly of like how you learned to communicate with these folks non-verbally too, and build, I think you say, loyalty and trust with folks, even though you were definitely the minority in the room. Tell us about that experience and how you were able to learn to be a leader and get someone, all around an idea and build a team, but not necessarily be able to speak the language fluently.
Yeah, I'm a really big fan. I talk a lot about with folks as they're kind of growing in their careers about, I call it like 1 foot on the ground. And the opposite of having 1 foot on the ground, you can walk, you can run, but you have 1 foot on the ground. The opposite is jumping. When you jump, you have no feet on the ground. When I think about taking on new roles, I often try to think about how do I have 1 foot on the ground where I'm bringing in a sense of strength or a skill set that I have down quite well. And then I'm going to walk or maybe run, or it's going to be a big step, but I'm going to go in kind of a new direction. And that allows me when I land in that new place to bring with me the strength of the skill sets of what I've done before while learning new things.
One thing I admire about you too, and you talk about this in some of your public expressions you've had via TED Talks and things like that, is that you always want to build loyalty with these folks. And by, I think, being a learner yourself and going about learning Portuguese and trying to basically involve yourself as much in their culture and the way they do business, more so than having them bend to you, you get this insane amount of loyalty and respect from these people that will then do anything for you. Is that something that you've just always done organically, or did that take intentionality and I'm sure lots of extra hours of time to be able to integrate yourself into a whole new world every couple of years.
Took a ton of intellectual energy and like caring and empathy and a desire to kind of like learn and try and fit in. But it did become just sort of a way of being. And I find with others that when you approach a situation with curiosity and wanting to kind of understand why something is the way it is, or why someone feels the way they do, or why they express something the way they did, gosh, one, you actually find a resolution and you find a way forward. But two, it can often be a really great way to build a relationship.
And I mean, there's a level of consistency that has to happen for it to, I think, take effect too. You can't just do it once and, show them you know how to say three things in Portuguese and they're like, oh, cool, he's bought in. It's going to be a constant, they need to understand it's your character and you're here to stay and you're here to invest in this community for the next 6 months. And I'm sure you see a shift, midway through that timeline to where these people start to respond differently and that level of relationship is established to be able to take you to the next level with that project, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I found pretty quickly after moving places that the thing that I remembered or like what stayed with me was the people. Like what you did on the work side, like, okay, we had a great results, so this happened. Wow, that was really cool. And, Brazil, I ran the Windows division and we went from the sixth to the third largest market in the world for computers. Like it was awesome. But what I remember are the people and still who I keep in touch with and chat with. And every birthday on either side, like we're back and forth and messaging. And they're just incredible people and relationships. But in moving to new places, it made a difference. And I think when people sensed that was for real, they would engage. And then we could actually develop really great relationships. And since they're work relationships, we could often do really cool things.
Very cool. I want to shift gears a little bit still on the topic of the fact that you've been all over the world and all this business travel, but I want to hear from you a little bit more about how you've managed self in that with like different time zones, I'm sure lack of sleep, different food, different whatever. How do you manage a consistency in yourself of being able to perform and, be cognitively available to learn new languages and to be, value added to whatever situation you're walking into, even though you may have just been traveling for the last 24 hours.
Yeah. One of the things I learned really early on too was, and actually from a lot of the great leaders I had a chance to work with at Microsoft, is like better or worse, you are visible. So when you are in a leadership role, others see you and you often don't realize the impact that you might have, good or bad, on just from unintentionally, maybe by the way that you come across or an expression or the way you look at something or you ignore something or, something you say under your breath. With that leadership, I think comes a sense of responsibility of being thoughtful in the messages that you're sending verbally and non-verbally. A lot of the times I didn't have verbal in some places where I was living. So I had to really be thoughtful about nonverbal. And so I'm sensitive about the messages that I send. And that means, for example, if I'm going to stay up all night and show up to a meeting the next day and like look exhausted and look worn out, like one, it's not respectful in my mind. Others would feel differently. In my mind, I view that as not respectful. It's the same thing. Like people can wear whatever they're comfortable in my opinion, and like dress however they want for work. But I like to dress in a certain way because I want to convey respect for the people that I'm meeting with. That's how I learned to do it in different countries in the world. And so taking that time to make sure that you can show up in a consistent way and kind of show up in a way where others feel like they can contribute has just always been something that's really important to me because it, to me, is a sign of respect.
Can we talk about your book a little bit now?
Yeah, I read a book a few years ago, right when I left China. I was stuck in, sounds odd now, but maybe actually we're more familiar with it. I had to wear a mask most days when I was living in Beijing because the air pollution was so bad. The Chinese government has actually done great work on improving air quality, but the air quality, if you think of like the worst day of a fire in, the US on the West Coast, for example, like your worst days there were probably the average day in Beijing, and air was bad. Therefore, on the weekends, I couldn't really go outside much. And so one of my activities on the weekends was writing. And so I spent my time while I was in Beijing, the last year and a half or so, writing a book focused on this concept of listening. The title is Loyal, Listen or You Always Lose. And it was this principle that when employees feel like their voices are heard, they can carry that great learning forward. And that sense of, I want to hear you. I know that whatever I hear from my customer will matter, and the person will be heard throughout the full cycle. And that drives loyalty. So that was the principle of my book. A lot of management practices, very codified, very transparent. And then a good probably 20% just at the time of the innovation that I was seeing in the China market, and how neat that was in the spirit that hopefully people could kind of learn from.
I have to say, when I read it, gosh, 3-4 years ago now, when I first met you, I actually never heard of the concept active listening. And like, this was the first time I'd even been aware of that idea, and the fact that like we can so easily not pay attention. But like you talk about, especially in other countries, when you only have the nonverbal communication, there's still ways to stay engaged: eye contact, nodding your head, and just ways to communicate that show that you're an engaged listener, not just like, typing away on your computer while somebody's talking. That just completely damages a relationship and rapport building. But when you actively listen, it builds this loyalty, and again, just increases the success level because everybody's kind of on the same page and just feels respected.
You said it very articulately. I appreciate that. Thank you for reading it and the feedback you provided me then and ever since. I sometimes worry that in the world we live in now, as much as we love Zoom, and I'm a big Zoom user and big Zoom fan. I love Teams also, but I love Zoom. But it's just this concept of virtual working. And as we live our lives through the camera, it's actually easier to multitask. So if you think of like, if I rewrote that section in the book today, then I talked about being on your phone and putting your phone away and like leaning forward maybe and looking at someone and like giving them your attention. But gosh, when you're doing a Zoom call, like you could be doing email on the side and texting other things, and who knows, like where you're on your phone underneath the screen, like so many other things that it's both even more important than ever and probably harder than ever to really give people that respect that you're listening actively.
Yeah. Oh, that's great perspective. Oh. So we've in and out talked a little bit about, I think, where a lot of your principles lie, but I want to hear, if there was the end all be all, the one principle, what would it be that you would say has helped you be most successful in business?
I think absolutely this notion, you hit it really well, listening and being curious. In fact, I call a chapter in my book listening with curiosity. So kind of mixing the two, but just that understanding why, and why asking questions and then listening to the answers, because you always find new things. And so whether that's from colleagues, and an example of the time I spent in Hong Kong and kind of trying to get that business going in a much better state than it was in before, or even more importantly now with customers. And so listening, and ideally the most vocal customer, gosh, they are the best source of feedback because they have often the ideas and they're willing to share with you what works and what doesn't. And as we're building product, those customer conversations I have today or user conversations, when I ask and I actually care and people are willing to engage and honor me to share, gosh, I love listening to those. And it's what makes me better and is making our product and helping grow Nametag.
That's awesome. Well, Aaron, this was so much fun. Thank you for being on the show.
It's really a pleasure to be here. You are doing incredible things. I love seeing you continue to just totally blow it out of the park in every role you take. And I think it's so fantastic that you've started this podcast on the side. It's just really a chance for people to take some of those great people and just share things broader with your community. So I'm humbled to have been here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, I love highlighting things like Nametag. I think that's a really cool new go-to-market motion, and like you're leading an industry and building something completely new and innovative. That is so cool. And however I can be helpful, my audience as well, we're here to support. So thanks, Aaron.
I appreciate that.